I stood by the old wooden chest in the attic, hands trembling as I opened the lid that hadn't been touched in over 40 years. Dust floated in the late afternoon sunlight as I pulled out a box filled with faded photos and yellowed letters. They were all addressed to my mother, but not from my father. I pulled out one letter in particular, dated 1961. My eyes scanned the page, and I swear my heart stopped. I miss the nights we spent together when your husband traveled for work. I know I promised to stay away, but your kiss still lingers. If the baby looks like me, we'll deal with that when the time comes. I dropped the letter. My knees gave way, and I collapsed on the attic floor. My breath caught in my throat. What baby was he talking about? Who wrote this? And then it hit me, he meant me. I had spent my whole life hating my mother for how she treated me. But this was something worse. This was betrayal stitched into my blood. That's when I heard a soft creak on the attic steps. Someone was there. Someone had followed me. My name is Jane Jessie. I'm 85 years old now, retired from Johns Hopkins after spending nearly 5 decades in the pediatric wing. My hands may be wrinkled, but they remember how to heal. My voice may be shaky, but it remembers how to comfort a crying child. I live in a quiet, cold corner of Michigan now. No kids. No husband. Just silence. People think old women knit, bake, and sit by the fire. Maybe I will do all that. But I also carry stories no one dares to ask about, especially this one. See, I never told anyone what I found that day in the attic. But now, I'm ready. I'm ready to speak. Because my mother's abuse wasn't the worst part. Finding out she cheated on my father was. And the ripple of that secret still follows me to this very day. My earliest memory is of cold eggs on a cold plate. Mother used to cook breakfast every day at 5 a.m. sharp. But she never waited for me to get to the table. By the time I arrived, the eggs would be stiff and the toast would be like cardboard. If I complained, she'd slap the back of my head and say, "Be grateful I fed you." She was a tall woman, blonde, beautiful, and always angry. She wore red lipstick every day and a tight bun that never had a hair out of place. To the neighbors, she was elegant. To me, she was terrifying. My father, Robert Jesse, was the opposite. Quiet. Kind. A soft smile is always hidden behind a thick mustache. He worked as a traveling salesman, often gone for weeks. When he came home, he brought souvenirs. A tiny wooden elephant from Detroit. A shiny pin from Chicago. But no matter how thoughtful the gift, my mother would barely look at him. "You're back," she'd say flatly. I remember how his eyes used to drop at that, like he expected it, but it still hurt. Growing up, my room was my only safe space. But even that wasn't always safe. Some nights, she'd barge in if she heard me humming or talking to my dolls. "You think this is a game?" she'd snap, dragging me out of bed and making me scrub the kitchen floor until my knees were raw. Once, she locked me outside in the snow for leaving a sock on the bathroom floor. My hands turned purple before Dad got home and rushed me inside. He yelled at her that night. I remember it. The only time he ever did. "What's wrong with you, Evelyn?" "She's just a child." She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just stared at him and said, "You're gone half the year, Robert. Don't you dare judge how I raise her." That night, I watched through the vent in my room as Dad slept on the couch, rubbing his eyes, whispering to himself. Still, I always thought he knew. I thought he stayed quiet because he was tired. Or maybe ashamed. I never guessed there was something even darker hidden behind her icy smile. Sometimes she'd be kind. That was the most confusing part. She once brought home a yellow dress and told me, "This was my favorite color when I was your age." I wore it until the seams ripped. She also sang beautifully. Once in a while, she'd sing while doing dishes, soft, haunting songs in French. I didn't understand the words, but I knew the sound of longing when I heard it. I used to think she had moments of love for me. Now, I wonder if she was remembering someone else's child. After my parents passed, Dad first, cancer. Then Mom, peacefully in her sleep, I moved back into the house to clear it out. I had no siblings, no cousins who cared. It was just me and the walls that had seen too much. That's when I found the attic. Dad always said, "Don't go up there, Janie. That's your mother's world." But now it was mine. The trunk sat in the far corner, behind broken chairs and moth-eaten coats. It was old, covered in scratch marks like something had tried to claw its way out. I opened it expecting memories. Instead, I found lies. Letters. Photos. A pressed white handkerchief with a man's initials I didn't recognize. J.W. That's when I found the letter that broke everything. If the baby looks like me, we'll deal with that when the time comes. Was I that baby? Was my whole life a lie? Was that why she hated me? Because I reminded her of someone else? I was still staring at the box when I heard the attic door creak. It wasn't the wind. I wasn't alone in the house. And whoever was there, they had a reason for following me. The attic door creaked again. I froze. I wasn't expecting visitors. No one knew I was back in town. At least, no one should have known. I held my breath, the letter still clutched in my hand, my fingers damp with sweat. The steps groaned. Closer. Closer. Then a voice. "Grandma." I almost laughed from the shock. "Emily." I called out, still gripping the dusty box like it might disappear. "Yeah, it's me," she said, stepping into the attic with her golden hair in a messy bun and earbuds dangling from her shoulders. "You okay? You weren't answering your phone." I exhaled deeply and slowly stood, hiding the letter behind my back. "I didn't hear it ring," I lied. She smiled, but her eyes quickly scanned the open trunk. "What's all this?" I hesitated. "Just old memories." I didn't tell her the truth. Not yet. Not until I could understand it myself. After Emily went back downstairs, I sat on my bed, that letter burning in my hand like it had teeth. I kept reading it over and over. "Your husband doesn't deserve to raise my child." I blinked hard. My father, my sweet, soft-spoken father, had raised me with love despite living beside a woman who must have reminded him daily of betrayal. Did he know? If he did, why didn't he ever say anything? Why didn't he leave? Why did he stay with a woman who hit me, insulted him, and lied to us both? Was it guilt? Obligation? Or was it something more tragic? Love? That night, I barely slept. The words of that letter kept repeating in my mind. And a strange question floated into my head, one I never thought I'd ask at 85 years old. Who am I, really? The next morning, I returned to the attic alone. I needed answers. I pulled everything out of the box, sorting through letters from the same man, J.W., each filled with more longing than the last. Some were from before I was born. Others were from the years after, hidden in envelopes with no stamps, meaning he must have delivered them by hand. I found a photo at the very bottom. It was worn and creased, but I recognized my mother instantly. She was young, smiling, wearing a floral dress, and beside her was a tall man in a navy uniform. He wasn't my father. His eyes were pale blue, and his smile was crooked in a way that made you trust him. On the back of the photo, she had written in faint pencil, "Jimmy, 1958. Our secret." My stomach twisted. So he had a name, Jimmy. And it sounded like she loved him. Worse still, I looked like him. Not my dad. Not even a little. I sat by the fireplace, the box on my lap. I wasn't sure what I was looking for anymore. Truth, closure, something to put this ghost to rest. Then I remembered something. My mom had worked at the town's small hospital back in the 50s as a volunteer. Dad mentioned it once. Maybe that's where she met him. I called the town archives office. Hi, I'm looking for hospital records from 1957 to 1961. Volunteers, specifically.
Evelyn Jesse.
The woman on the phone paused. Let me pull it up. Yes, Evelyn Jesse.
Volunteered during those exact years.
Was there a James or Jimmy working there?
Maybe in the military.
Another pause. There's a James Walker listed as a Navy medic on rotation at the time. He was only assigned for a few months in 58 and again in 60. Walker. J.W. It matched the initials on the handkerchief. It matched the handwriting on the letters. And suddenly, my mother's coldness made a cruel kind of sense. She didn't hate me because I was her daughter. She hated me because I wasn't his. I grabbed my father's old Bible from the shelf. He kept our family tree there, carefully handwritten, with birth dates, marriage anniversaries, and little notes. I found my name, Jane Evelyn Jesse. Born, March 1961. Next to it, Dad had drawn a tiny heart. I stared at that little heart until tears blurred my vision. He knew. He must have known. But he loved me anyway. Suddenly, I felt like a fraud. My entire identity, Jane Jesse, daughter of Robert and Evelyn, was built on shaky ground. Was I Jane Walker? Was my birth a sin hidden beneath years of lies and bruises? Or was I just a little girl who got caught in the middle of someone else's heartbreak? Later that evening, the phone rang. A number I didn't recognize.
Hello.
The voice on the other end was gravelly but soft. I'm looking for Jane Jesse.
This is her.
A long pause. My name's Daniel Walker. I think we might be related. I nearly dropped the phone. My name's Daniel Walker. I think we might be related. The words echoed in my ear like a bell ringing from the bottom of a well. I couldn't breathe. My hand gripped the phone so tightly it creaked. Walker. I repeated, barely above a whisper.
Yes, ma'am, the man said gently.
I believe you may be my half-sister. I didn't know what to say. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I'd spent 85 years living a quiet life, believing I was the only child of Robert and Evelyn Jesse. Now, this stranger was telling me he shared a father with me? A father I never met?
I'm sorry, I finally muttered.
How do you know that?
I found a box of letters, he replied.
My mother kept them all these years. They were written by a man named James Walker. My father. Some of them mention you. One even has a baby photo of a little girl named Jane. My knees buckled, and I sat down slowly in the kitchen chair, staring at the wall as tears welled up in my eyes. Your father was…
Jimmy.
Yes, ma'am. Navy medic. Stationed in Michigan during the late 50s and early 60s. My mom was his wife, but he went missing. Left one day, never came back. Now I was shaking. He disappeared? Was that why Mom stopped smiling? Was that why she turned cold? And more terrifying, did she have something to do with it? 3 days later, I met Daniel. We agreed to meet at a small diner halfway between our towns. I wore my best coat, the navy blue one with the silver buttons, and pinned my mother's brooch to my collar. I wanted to be strong, elegant, untouchable. But when he walked in, I nearly dropped my teacup. He looked just like me. Same eyes. Same smile.
Same way of tilting his head when he scanned a room.
I stood up, and he smiled warmly.
You must be Jane.
I nodded, and for the first time in decades, I hugged someone who felt like blood. We sat in that diner for hours, trading stories, piecing together the mystery our parents had left behind. He told me Jimmy was a kind man, faithful, he thought, until he found the letters. My mom always suspected he had a secret, Daniel said. She thought he was hiding something, but he never said a word. Just kept looking out the window like he was searching for something. I told him about the attic, the letters, the photo, the handkerchief, and then I said the words I'd never said aloud. My mother was cruel. To me. To Dad. I think it was because of what she lost. Or what she couldn't bury. Daniel looked down at his coffee cup.
She never smiled much either.
For a long time, we just sat in silence. Two children of a man who never got to raise either of us. When I got home, I dug deeper. I requested a military death certificate for James Walker. What I got back made my hands go cold. Status: missing, presumed dead. 1962. Location: Detroit, Michigan. Cause: unconfirmed. Presumed dead? But why? Where? Why was he in Detroit, the very city Dad had brought back souvenirs from? Unless Dad had found out. Unless there was more to his silence than love. No. I pushed the thought away. Dad couldn't have done something to him. Right. I remembered something then, an old locked drawer in Dad's desk he never let me near. The desk had been in the garage for years, covered in tarps and old tools. I found it. The lock was rusty. I pried it open with a butter knife. Inside was a single envelope. No name. No stamp. Inside it, a photograph of Jimmy Walker, taken from a distance, his back turned. And a short note written in my father's handwriting. I saw him leave. I let him go. I said nothing. I dropped to my knees. He knew. He really knew. And he chose silence. Tucked behind the photo was a second piece of paper, old and yellowed. My father's handwriting again. Jane, if you ever read this, it means the truth found its way to you. Your mother loved once, just not me. I stayed because you were the only piece of her I wanted to keep. No matter whose blood runs in your veins, you were always my daughter. Love, Dad. I wept. For him. For me. For the man who left and the one who stayed. The next morning, I opened my mailbox and found a thick envelope. No return address. Just my name. Inside was a crumpled letter, a faded photo of my mother holding a baby, and a note scribbled at the bottom. You don't know the whole truth yet. Evelyn kept secrets even I didn't understand. Meet me at 7 p.m. at her old garden. A friend. I stared at the paper, my pulse racing. Who sent this? Who still knew secrets, after all these years? I read the note again. You don't know the whole truth yet. Evelyn kept secrets even I didn't understand. Meet me at 7 p.m. at her old garden. A friend. A friend. I didn't think Evelyn Jessie had friends. Enemies? Sure. Strained acquaintances? Many. But someone who called themselves a friend and still cared enough to dig this up after 50 years? It didn't sit right. Still, curiosity outweighed fear. That evening, I pulled on my wool cardigan, the one with deep pockets, and tucked the letter into one side. Emily offered to drive me, but I said no. This was something I had to face alone. Mom's garden sat behind the house, wild now, overgrown and tangled. What used to be neat rows of roses and daffodils were now thorns, weeds, and forgotten roots. The sun was setting. The air smelled like old lavender and dirt. I waited. And just when the church bells rang 7, a figure emerged from the trees. A woman. Thin, with silver hair pulled back into a loose braid. She wore an old coat and walked with a cane. She stared at me for a long moment before speaking. You look like him.
Jimmy.
She nodded slowly.
I was there when it all started, she whispered. And when it all ended.
Her name was Mary Ann Tucker. She had been my mother's best friend, back when they were girls. Before the war. Before everything. She used to visit the house when I was a baby. But one day, Evelyn told her never to come again.
I knew Evelyn wasn't well, she said.
But I didn't know how bad it had gotten. I didn't know what she was hiding until I saw her with him.
With Jimmy?
I asked. Yes. She wasn't just in love. She was obsessed. She believed they were soulmates, that fate brought them together.
She told me she was going to leave Robert.
That shocked me. She was going to leave Dad? Mary Ann nodded. But Jimmy, he didn't want to destroy a marriage. He was already feeling guilty. And when he found out she was pregnant, well, he panicked. I swallowed hard.
So he left.
Mary Ann looked me dead in the eyes. No. He tried to stay.
But Evelyn wouldn't let him. She threatened him, Mary Ann said, her voice tightening.
She said if he tried to come around again, she'd tell everyone he forced himself on her. That she'd ruin him. And in the 60s, that kind of accusation could destroy a man's life. My stomach turned. She told me once, if I can't have him my way, I'll make sure no one else will. I clenched my fists. That was my mother. Cold. Cruel. Controlling. She changed after he left. Mary Ann went on. Became hard. Shut everyone out. And when you were born. She hesitated. What? She wouldn't let anyone hold you. Not even me. Not even Robert. I blinked. But why? Mary Ann's eyes filled with tears. Because she didn't want anyone to love you more than she did.
She didn't want you stolen, like she thought Jimmy had been.
I confronted her once, Mary Ann said.
I asked if Jimmy had really left town.
What did she say? She didn't answer. She just stared out the window and said, some goodbyes don't need to be said out loud. My blood ran cold. I always wondered if something happened to him, something she never confessed. Like what? I asked, heart thudding. Mary Ann pulled something from her coat pocket. A faded photo. It was a snapshot of my mother, standing at the edge of the old lake behind our house. Beside her, Jimmy. But what made my heart stop was the look on her face. She wasn't smiling. She was crying and holding a spade. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at that photo, the spade in her hand, the lake in the background. Why a spade? Why was Jimmy never heard from again? And what did Dad mean in his letter when he wrote, I let him go? Did he know what happened? Did my mother bury more than her secrets? I needed answers, and part of me feared that the only way to get them was to go back to that lake. The next morning, I returned to the lake. It was covered in mist, the ground soft from rain. I stood there with a borrowed shovel, my knees aching, my heart heavy. I picked a spot near the largest willow, where the shadows gathered. With every dig, my hands trembled. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was old and imagining things, that grief and betrayal had clouded my judgment. But then, thud! The shovel hit something solid. Wood. Rotten. Buried deep. I dropped the shovel. My breath caught in my throat. I fell to my knees and pulled the wet earth back with my hands. It was a box, and carved on the edge, barely visible, J.W., 1961. The dirt was soaked and cold beneath my fingernails, but I didn't stop digging. Not even when my arms burned. Not even when the wind started to howl. There it was. A half-buried wooden box, maybe 2 feet long, worn by time, softened by rot. carved faintly into the edge. JW, 1961. My breath trembled in the air. I sat back on my heels, staring at it, frozen with fear. What was I about to uncover? I used the edge of the shovel to lift the lid. The hinges creaked like something long dead whispering awake. Inside was not what I expected. There were no bones. Nobody. No murder weapon. But what lay there chilled me just the same. A folded navy uniform, neatly pressed, as if someone had packed it with care. A black leather wallet, edges frayed. A locket. And a letter. My fingers shook as I reached for the letter. I opened it slowly, afraid it might fall apart in my hands. It was addressed to "My dearest Jane," in a neat, elegant script. And it began, "If you're reading this, then the truth has found you, and I hope it brings you peace. I never stopped thinking about you. I wasn't allowed to be in your life, but I watched from a distance. Your mother made sure I stayed far away, and for years I obeyed. But I wrote letters. Dozens. She never gave them to you. The day I left, I didn't run. I was forced out. Evelyn told me if I didn't disappear, she would make sure Robert, and the law, would come after me. She said I'd never see you again. So I made a choice. I left everything behind, including this box. I buried it here so that maybe one day, if fate allowed, you'd find it. I'm sorry, Jane. I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because I did." I clutched the letter to my chest, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. For all the years I thought I was unwanted, abandoned, forgotten. I wasn't. Jimmy loved me. I sat at the edge of the lake for hours, the box beside me, trying to stitch the broken pieces together. My mother had told everyone Jimmy left. But Jimmy hadn't just left. He'd been pushed out, threatened, silenced. And my father, he knew. That photo, that note, I saw him leave. I let him go. I said nothing. Why would he keep that to himself? Was it for my sake? Or hers? And why keep the photo hidden all these years? That night, I lit a fire in the old hearth and sat alone, surrounded by the relics of people who were no longer alive. Jimmy's letter. My father's Bible. My mother's brooch. 3 lives. 3 lies. And me in the middle. I realized then, my story was never mine. It was a patchwork of everyone else's shame. But I had a choice now. To let their silence define me, or to speak. So I called Daniel. "Meet me tomorrow," I said. "I have something you need to see." We met at the diner again. I handed him Jimmy's letter and watched his face as he read. At first, he smiled. Then his hands began to shake. "I always thought he left us," Daniel whispered. "Mom cried every night for a year. We thought he had another family, but I never imagined this." He looked up at me, eyes red. "He tried. He really tried." I nodded. Our father was a good man, just trapped by the choices of others. Daniel stared out the window. "What do we do with this?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. It was Marianne. She never called. Only one line in the text. "Come to the church basement. Now." I found something in Evelyn's old donation box. "Something you need to see." My heart pounded. Another secret? I stood up from the booth. "Where are you going?" Daniel asked. I looked at him with a mixture of fear and knowing, to find out how deep this really goes. The church hadn't changed in 60 years. Same cracked stone steps. Same brass door handles. Same smell of old hymnals and wooden polish. Marianne met me at the side entrance, flashlight in hand. She looked pale, like she hadn't slept all night. "What did you find?" I asked, clutching my coat tighter. She said nothing, just turned and led me down the creaky staircase into the dim basement. The air was damp and musty. She stopped at an old donation bin covered in cobwebs. Then she pulled out a shoebox. "I never opened it before," she whispered. "Evelyn donated it after Robert passed. I thought it was just junk. Until today." Marianne opened the box slowly. Inside were letters, some from Jimmy, but many I hadn't seen before. And something else. A diary. Worn leather cover. Pages falling out. I opened it. The first entry was dated April 5, 1961, the month I was born. "They think I'm broken. They don't know I'm stronger than ever. Jimmy left, but he'll come back. He has to. Jane is proof that he can't forget me. Robert stares at me like I'm a stranger. Good. Let him wonder. Let him feel the weight I've carried." My fingers trembled. More entries followed. They grew darker. Paranoid. Angry. "If Jane ever finds out, she'll hate me. But she doesn't know what love costs. She doesn't know what it takes to protect someone from heartbreak." One entry caught my breath. Jimmy tried to take her. He came to the house, shouting. Said he wanted to raise Jane. I told him no. "She's mine." He said he'd call the police. That's when I snapped. He never came back after that. I stared at the page, the ink smudged by what looked like water, or maybe tears. "Marianne," I whispered. "I think she did something to him." Marianne swallowed hard. "I think so too." At the bottom of the box was one last item, an envelope with no name. Inside, a photo I had never seen. My mother, standing in the garden. In the background, Jimmy's navy hat lying on the ground near a wheelbarrow. It was blurry, but what shook me was the look in her eyes. Not sadness, fear. Daniel and I drove to the local police station the next morning. We handed over the diary, the letters, and the photo. The officer, a young man with freckles and a tired smile, listened carefully. "I can't promise anything," he said, "but we'll open a cold case file. There may be enough here to reclassify Jimmy Walker as a missing person under suspicious circumstances." "Even after 60 years?" Daniel asked. The officer nodded. "Some truths don't stay buried. Not forever." That evening, I returned home and started a fire. I was exhausted. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I sat with Jimmy's uniform draped across my lap, wondering what kind of man he really was, and what kind of life we might have had. Then came a knock at the door. I opened it slowly. A man stood there, late 60s, white beard, thick coat. He held a brown envelope and looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. "Are you Jane Jessie?" he asked. "I am." He handed me the envelope. "I knew your father," he said. "I knew what he did, and what he covered up." Then he turned and walked away without another word. I rushed to the table, tore open the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and one line in black ink. "He didn't just let Jimmy go. He watched." I dropped the letter. My knees buckled. Did my father know more than I ever imagined? He didn't just let Jimmy go. He watched. That single sentence echoed in my mind like thunder rolling through the bones of the house. The handwriting was sharp, precise, cold. Not like Jimmy's elegant loops. Not like Dad's careful curves. This was someone else. Someone who had been watching them all, and watching me. The next morning, I called the police department and asked to speak with the cold case officer. "I received a letter," I said, "from someone claiming to know more about Jimmy Walker's disappearance." The officer's tone immediately shifted. "Can you bring it in?" "I will. But I need your help first." I gave him the name signed at the bottom of the envelope. Russell B. Gaines. It was faint, barely legible, but enough to trace. An hour later, I got a call back. Jane. Russell Gaines was Robert Jesse's co-worker, hardware salesman. Worked with him for over 20 years. I nearly dropped the phone.
Do you know where he is now?
Passed away.
3 years ago.
My heart skipped.
Then who left this note?
Desperate for answers, I visited the town library. The archive room was dusty and still. I flipped through old local newspapers, hunting for clues. That's when I found a headline from 1962. Navy medic vanishes after heated dispute in quiet suburb. The article was vague. Said Jimmy had a personal disagreement with a local homeowner. Witnesses claimed they saw him leave town. No mention of my mother. No mention of Dad. But there was a photo. Grainy, black and white. Jimmy standing outside our house. And my father, watching from the porch. That night, I couldn't stop shaking. My mother lied. My father stayed silent. And now, it seemed he may have done more than that. Had he helped her, covered for her, or had he stood there and done nothing while she destroyed the man who tried to love me? I remembered Dad's letter. I saw him leave. I let him go. I said nothing. Maybe that wasn't guilt. Maybe it was a warning. Daniel called the next morning.
You won't believe what I found, he said.
His voice was shaky, urgent. I talked to my mother's cousin. She remembers a man, your dad, visiting Jimmy just days before he disappeared. She said they argued. Loudly. Outside a cafe. Do you think Dad threatened him? Daniel hesitated. She thinks Jimmy was offered money to leave. She says he left that cafe shaking, muttering about how the whole world was against him. I closed my eyes, the weight of betrayal falling heavier than ever. My entire life, every memory, every bedtime story, every ride on my father's shoulders. Was it all built on a secret he paid to bury? Later that day, the officer returned. He had a box in his hands. What's that? I asked. Your father's safe deposit box, he said. Found it while combing through old estate records. You're listed as next of kin. I opened it slowly. Inside was a stack of documents, receipts, letters, and one cassette tape, labeled, For Jane.
Do not open it until I'm gone.
Daniel and I dusted off an old tape recorder and pressed play. Dad's voice crackled through the speaker, older, tired. Jane, if you're hearing this, I'm no longer here. And you found the truth I hoped would stay buried. I didn't kill Jimmy. But I didn't stop it either. He came to me, said he was going to take you and run. I couldn't let that happen. You were my daughter, even if not by blood.
I told him to leave town, or I'd tell the police he was harassing my wife.
I didn't know Evelyn had already snapped. I came home that night and he was gone. Just gone. She said he left.
But her hands were shaking.
I knew, but I never asked.
Because I didn't want to know.
I stayed, Jane. For you. And I'm sorry for everything. I walked out into the garden. My knees felt weak. My lungs are tight. All these years I thought I was unwanted, unloved. But the truth was more complicated. Jimmy loved me, but was chased away. Dad loved me, but chose silence over truth. And Mom, maybe she loved me too, in her twisted, broken way. But her kind of love left scars. Just before sunset, the police called.
We've found something near the lake.
I didn't ask what. I already knew. After 60 years, Jimmy Walker had finally been found.
"We've found something near the lake."
I didn't need to ask what it was. I already knew. The nightmares, the letters, the box, the diary, the whispers through time, all led here. Jimmy Walker had never left town. He had been beneath our feet all along, buried under the silence my mother demanded, and my father allowed. They had cordoned off the area near the large willow by the lake, the same place I'd dug up the box days earlier. Police tape flapped in the breeze. Flashing lights painted the trees in red and blue shadows. I stood behind the caution line, gripping my coat as officers carefully pulled up what was left of a rotted wooden enclosure. Bones. Fragments of a navy belt buckle. Tattered cloth. A broken locket that matched the one in my attic box.
"Is it him?"
I asked the lead officer, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded solemnly. "We'll need dental and DNA to be sure. But yes,
"This is James Walker."
my knees gave out. Daniel caught me before I hit the ground. By the next morning, the story had spread. Cold case breakthrough, remains of Navy medic found after 60 years in Michigan Lake. Reporters called. A local station even asked for an interview. But I declined. This wasn't just a mystery solved. It was my life, my pain, my father's quiet guilt, my mother's madness, Jimmy's love, lost to time and lies. I wasn't ready to share it with the world. Not yet. Marianne came by with a pot of soup and soft eyes. "You were brave," she said as I sat on the porch, watching crows circle overhead. "I wasn't," I replied. "I spent 85 years in the dark." "No, sweetheart, you just didn't have the right light." She placed a hand on mine. "Evelyn was my best friend once," she said. "And I loved her. But she was broken in ways I never understood. And I hate what she did to you." "She took him from me," I whispered. "She took everything." "She didn't win," Marianne said. "You're still here." A week later, the police released Jimmy's remains to Daniel and me. We buried him next to his mother's grave in a quiet cemetery just outside town. I placed the pressed Navy uniform and his original letters into the casket. He had finally come home. As we stood by the fresh dirt, Daniel handed me something wrapped in cloth. "What's this?" I asked. He smiled. "Found it in my dad's closet. Something I think belongs to you." I unwrapped it. A music box. Old. Scratched. But when I turned the key, it played a gentle lullaby. Inside the lid was etched, "To Jane.
Someday, you'll understand."
My throat tightened. Jimmy had made this for me. And now, finally, I understood. That night, I sat with my granddaughter Emily by the fire. She watched me carefully as I told her the story, every detail. About the mother who abused me, the father who stayed silent, the real father I never got to meet, the lies, the lake, the love. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. When I finished, she hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. "You're the strongest woman I know, Grandma," she whispered. Just when I thought everything was over, a letter arrived in the mail. Postmarked from Illinois, dated 2 years ago. Inside was a safety deposit box key, and a note. "For Jane Jessie. If this ever finds her, give her what's inside." It was from a lawyer's office. No name. No explanation. But I knew exactly what it meant. Jimmy had left one more secret behind. "For Jane Jessie. If this ever finds her, give her what's inside." The small brass key sat on my kitchen table, gleaming in the morning light. It felt heavier than metal, like it carried a lifetime's worth of silence and love. The letter was unsigned, but it came from a law office in Illinois, a state Jimmy had never officially lived in. Or so I thought. Daniel drove. I brought the letter, the key, and the locket. Emily insisted on coming too. It's part of our story now, Grandma, she said gently. The town was quiet. Flat farmlands and faded diners. We pulled into the small bank the letter mentioned, a brick building with peeling white paint and a flickering neon clock inside. The manager had been expecting us. I never thought I'd see someone come for this, she said, unlocking the deposit box vault. It's been here over 60 years. Paid in full. She handed me a small metal box. I held my breath as I opened it. High moment. The secret he left behind. Inside was a folded newspaper clipping, a baby bracelet with the name Jane, and another envelope, this one sealed with red wax. I opened it slowly. It was a letter. From Jimmy. If you're reading this, it means the truth has survived. It means the lies didn't win. And maybe, just maybe, you made it out okay. I don't know what kind of mother Evelyn became. I don't know if Robert ever told you. But I loved you. I still do. Every second I was forced away from you broke my heart. I opened a small life insurance policy in your name. It's modest. But it's something. A seed. A start. A father's apology. Enclosed was a set of documents, insurance paperwork, details of a trust fund, and a final note scribbled in the corner. Live for you, Jane. Not for the secrets they left behind. On the drive home, I said nothing. Not because I was sad, but because I finally understood the full weight of it all. The abuse. The silence. The betrayal. It didn't erase the love. Jimmy may not have raised me, but he had tried. He left a paper trail of his devotion. And now, 85 years later, I could finally say it. I was loved. Deeply. Fiercely. Quietly. The next week, I visited the local women's shelter in my hometown. I handed them the check from the trust fund. I want this to help mothers and daughters, I said. The ones who don't get to speak. The ones who think silence is the only option. They cried. I cried. For once, the story wasn't just about pain. It was about healing. It had taken me years to do it. But I finally went. Her tombstone sat in the family plot. Neat, tidy, untouched. I stood there in silence for a long time. Then I whispered, "You hurt me. You broke me. But I survived you." I reached into my coat and placed Jimmy's locket at the base of her grave. I hope you made peace with him, wherever you both ended up. That night, I opened my mother's diary one last time. A final page had loosened from the binding and fallen between the cushions of my armchair. I read it aloud. Jane looked like him from the moment she was born. Every cry, every smile, every stubborn tilt of her chin, he lived in her. But I couldn't let him take her. Not because I hated him, but because I couldn't bear to watch someone else raise the only good thing I'd ever made. She'll hate me, but she'll be strong. She'll survive everything. Even me. She'll hate me, but she'll be strong. She'll survive everything. Even me. Those were the last words my mother ever wrote about me. Not a confession. Not quite an apology, but a final, twisted recognition of what she had done and who I had become in spite of it. I closed the diary and placed it beside Dad's old Bible and Jimmy's locket. It was time to write the ending in my own words. I sat at my desk that morning, sunlight pouring in through the window like a warm blessing. For the first time in my life, I picked up a pen, not to record someone else's words, but to finally write mine. My name is Jane Jessie. I was raised in a house full of ghosts, of love denied, truths buried, and a silence that screamed louder than any shout. My mother hit me. My father held me. And the man who should have raised me died loving me from the shadows. But I am still here. And I am not broken. With the money from Jimmy's old insurance policy, Daniel and I did something bold. We built a bench by the lake, near the willow where we had found him. We carved his name into the wood. James Walker, a father who never got the chance. Below it, we added, truth may be buried, but love always rises. It became a quiet place, a sacred one. People from town started to visit. Some left flowers, others left notes. A few left nothing but tears. One cold autumn day, Daniel pulled me into a hug at the cemetery. I'm moving back to Illinois, he said. I've got grandkids of my own now. They deserve to know who their great-grandfather really was. I smiled and handed him the original locket. Give them this. Let them know he wasn't perfect, but he was real. He nodded. So were you, Jane. The strongest person I've ever met. Emily decided to become a writer. She said our story inspired her. Her first published book was titled, Letters from the Lake, A Granddaughter's Journey Through Her Grandmother's Truth. It sold modestly, but more importantly, it helped people. Survivors wrote in. Strangers shared their stories. Some even came to visit me, sitting on the bench beside the lake, asking how I endured. I didn't endure. I'd tell them. I lived. That's different. Now I sit here, 85 years old, with silver hair and a heart made from threads stronger than steel. I am not the girl my mother tried to break. I am not the secret my real father had to leave behind. I am not the lie my father covered in silence. I am the woman who uncovered the truth, who held it up to the light, who forgave, who survived. And if someone finds this story someday, maybe they'll remember. The past may haunt you, but it doesn't get to own you. Thank you for following this powerful journey to the end. If this touched your heart, let us know where you're watching from and comment below. Justice has no expiration date. Like, comment, subscribe. For more real, raw, and bold stories like this, stay with us.